Hey guys, hey Nerd Legion fans out there. Today we're talking about yet another video game franchise transition coming at you, this time on Amazon Prime. It's Fallout.
Here on Nerd Legion, as you guys know, we talk about sci-fi and fantasy properties, intellectual properties, TV and films. And now we've got another video game adaptation, Doa. And this
Way
week,
to make it sound as boring as possible, by the way. We talk about properties, intellectual properties. I'm like, you gotta get into the real like podcast mentality. Like, hey guys, hey Nerd Legion fans out there. Today we're talking about yet another video game franchise transition coming at you, this time on Amazon Prime. It's Fallout. Hey, did you ever play the video games Fallout? I've started a couple and never finished them because I didn't like their grimy science fiction post-apocalyptic landscape.
Also,
so here we are watching the show.
It doesn't matter if you like it or not, Doa. You're not going to finish a video game because that's just who you are.
I have finished video games. I've been known to finish one. I finished the Super Mario RPG remake.
Yeah,
so
but
there you go.
You are well known for starting games, getting 2 hours into them, and then never, ever, ever, ever finishing them if they're single-player games.
Rarely. I finish like one per year now, which is better. That is an improvement. That's an improvement.
What was the one you finished in the last year?
Super Mario RPG remake.
Any others?
Actually, yeah, Chained Echoes. I don't know. I've been playing like more indie RPG, like JRPG inspired stuff. Chained Echoes is a fantastic game, by the way, and it's long. It's like 50, 60 hours. It's legit. Yeah. But as far as AAA games, no. And quadruple A, haven't even touched them yet.
Yeah. What is a quadruple A game?
Oh, you haven't heard about this?
Is this a meme?
So yeah, well, it is. It has become a meme. What was the name of that game again? There was a pirate game. Yeah, there was a pirate game by Bones. Yeah, Skull and Bones, where the lead developer referred to it as the world's first quadruple A game, and then it took them way too long to release it. And when they did, it was worse than the Assassin's Creed that did the same thing. Yeah.
Which is too bad because, like, it could have been good, but we still have Sea of Thieves, so that's
Sea of Thieves is the best pirate game ever, hands down. There's no better pirate game than Sea of Thieves.
I love Sea of Thieves. Anyway, this isn't about Sea of Thieves and our love of pirate games and or quadruple A titles, and it's not even an Ubisoft title. Technically, it's not even really a Bethesda title because it existed pre-Bethesda. And for you guys who don't know, Fallout is a post-apocalyptic science fiction franchise that they have now magically transformed into a television series, courtesy of Amazon and Amazon Prime. The Fallout series started many moons ago, Doa, and I played Fallout and Fallout 2 when I was a kid. Yeah, they were isometric RPGs, so like Baldur's Gate. If you guys know now. And then when they revived the franchise with Bethesda, who is also, of course, the developer who does the Elder Scrolls games, like, Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, and did, Star Citizen recently?
No,
not Star Citizen. What was the one? Starfield. That's right. Star
Citizen
isn't out yet. Is never coming out.
No. Yeah, it'll be perpetually shadow out, basically. But Starfield came out and people were not thrilled with it. I played it for a couple hours and then never went back to it.
Of course. Anyway, I actually, Doa, I'm gonna say this up front. I hate Bethesda games. I hate them.
Really?
I hate them. I hate the new Fallout games. I hate Skyrim. I hated Oblivion.
I mean, say what you want about Fallout. I don't care, but like the Elder Scrolls games, I've loved those games since I was a kid. They're so good.
Look, I understand that I'm not saying they're bad games, guys, before you get all angry. Monte Cristo, do not like them.
That's okay.
I do not like I prefer, so I don't like open world games kind of as a rule because I like narrative and I like story. And I understand why people enjoy the sandbox nature of some of the Elder Scrolls games and the Fallout games. I prefer a more directed experience, which is why I like The Witcher 3. It's probably my favorite game ever, even though that is also an open world game, because it kind of guides you a little bit more cleanly and has a more compelling storyline. But I understand why people like these games. I just deeply dislike them. I do not have fun playing them.
We've talked about this before, and I think that is a fair criticism. If you aren't a fan of that style of game, then it's very hard to get into any of this stuff. For me, I've always loved that open world sort of experience, right? Where I love the idea of and that's not to say I don't like a tight storyline too, because I do enjoy those games from time to time. But I like the idea of looking off into the distance and being like, there's a mountain over there, and I'm just gonna go there and see what's there. And I know along the way I'm gonna get embroiled in various quests and experiences. I'm gonna have an adventure, right? I don't know what's happening, and I'm excited to strike out on my own and see what happens. So I've always liked the Elder Scrolls games for that reason. I've always disliked the Fallout games for almost the same reason, where you get out in the Fallout thing and like, hey, there's this dirty, destroyed building over there, or there's this dirty sewer over there. I don't want to go to any of those places. They disgust me. I just want to go back in the vault and stay there instead. So that's why I'm not into Fallout. I just don't like the aesthetic. I've never been a fan of the cynical post-apocalyptic vibe. I'm not a big fan of Borderlands. I mean, there's a whole bunch of different examples of this. I know it's a popular genre, but I've never really gotten into like that aesthetic. So I haven't liked those games.
Did you like Mad Max? I'm curious.
I do like Mad Max, but I think Mad Max is so good that it overpowers my dislike for the setting, especially Fury Road. I'm not a big fan of the old ones.
Fury Road's amazing, right?
Yeah, Fury Road's just incredible. I've never felt like such nonstop tension in a film all the way through. It's so great. But so that is the exception, right? But all that aside, I kind of like the Fallout TV show, and I think the main reason is because it was kind of like, and for very good reason, it was kind of like a very long Portlandia sketch, and
including Fred Armisen.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Well, including the writer of Portlandia was one of the main writers on the show. So, and it really goes through. And we talked about Portlandia before on the show, and the humor style, just the way the scenes flow, the dialogue, a lot of it reminded me of that, and so I think that's one of the main reasons why I like this show. So it's like a very long Portlandia sketch. I liked it.
Who from Portlandia was on this? I actually didn't know that.
Well, I mean, do you mean acting in it or writing it?
No, writing it.
Let me see. It's in my notes. Hold on. Graham Wagner was a writer on like 50 episodes of Portlandia, which I think
I can see that for sure. It has the same kind of like non sequitur absurdist humor.
Well, when you get to Fred Armisten's radio station, that scene, that is a Portlandia sketch right there. Just the discussion about music amid the different like traps and giant like bear traps that have caught people. Like that is just a Portlandia sketch, and I'm absolutely here for it.
You can't get that warm sound anymore. The bass, the treble, the mids.
Oh, that right, yeah.
Oh, here.
Oh, that, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and if you guys aren't familiar with Fallout, what Fallout does in terms of its tone, and it always has been this way. So if we rewind time back to the Fallout versions that I did like, which were the isometric RPGs, they were developed by a developer called Black Isle Studios. And Black Isle Studios did also one of my favorite games of all time, and you can get the remastered version of this, and if you have not played it, it holds up very well, which is the game that was released in 1999 called Planescape Torment, which is probably the best written video game of all time.
It's up there. Yeah.
It is enormously good. And purely from a character development and writing perspective, as well as gameplay perspective, because you can actually go through that entire game with no combat. And if you guys like Baldur's Gate 3, like Planescape Torment was kind of, this very innovative and honestly underappreciated game, but it is rightfully considered one of the greatest games of all time. So they made that. But previously, they made Fallout in 97 and Fallout 2 in 98. And these were the isometric RPGs that were really, really good. So Black Isle was, an excellent studio.
Well, Black Isle also did the first 2 Baldur's Gate games.
They published them. They didn't develop them. BioWare developed.
Oh, didn't they?
BioWare developed Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2, but they were the publisher of those games.
Okay.
So yeah, Black Isle directly developed Fallout, Fallout 2, Planescape Torment, and Icewind Dale, and Icewind Dale 2.
You're right.
All of those games were fabulous. So it's a very good studio. Then Bethesda took over the IP. They started developing the more first-person RPGs, a la the Elder Scrolls series, except now set in the Fallout universe. That started with Fallout 3 in 2008. So there was like a 10-year gap. And I played Fallout 3 when it came out, and I was not in love with it. Fallout, and they've done Fallout 4, Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 76. Tons of other properties that have then existed, since that time. They're developing Fallout 5 right now. Fallout 76 was the last game to come out, like last of these style of games. It came out in 2018, and now we have this Fallout television series that's set in the world. And the world of Fallout, as Doa said, that the brief of it is that it effectively comes out of a nuclear apocalypse between Russia or the USSR, I suppose, and the United States in the 1950s. So kind of culturally, the United States was frozen during that time period because people went into these vaults underground. And so the series tone, like in every Fallout game, it plays with kind of this 1950s optimism, that is basically crossed with like mutation, radiation fallout, and hyperviolence. So like
did they change the timeline between the video games and the show? Because that's not the show timeline. Because the show basically is a world where there's this event called the Divergence that happens sometime between 1945 and like the early 1960s, because it's essentially not our Earth. Where like instead of going for circuits and things, they preferred,
it's an alternate timeline.
Yeah, they vacuum tubes and nuclear power and just went that direction instead. So they became very advanced in some directions and still very primitive in other directions.
Right. Yeah. So it is an alternate universe, guys. And you can see that just because the technology, as Doe is pointing out, is very different. They have these powered suits that they were using for combat. There are allusions to a war that was like a hot war, not a cold war, that was happening between the United States and other, like the USSR, that then resulted in the apocalypse. Vault-Tec, the company, becomes the biggest company in America, and they are basically, selling people doomsday shelters, technologically advanced doomsday shelters that they can live in for hundreds of years underneath the ground. In many of the Fallout games, you are playing somebody coming out of one of these vaults.
You start there,
yeah. You start there. And you come out and kind of see what's happened with the world. But not everybody died during the apocalypse, so things have been kind of like chugging along on the surface. And that's where we find ourselves in this TV show as well, which is one of our main characters. Lucy is coming out of one of these vaults where she was born and has lived her entire life. It's 200 years after the apocalyptic situation. And there are other main characters who have been born on the surface world that she's interacting with, or were born actually like, in the 20th century and have lived for 200 years afterwards, as in the case of like Walter Goggins' Cooper Howard / the Ghoul character. And so I think like tonally, as you point out, this is very similar to the video game series, which is that it does have this kind of absurdist humor to it. It does, satirically skewer 1940s, 1950s sensibilities of this like gung-ho American, like cheesy American optimism. That is always with the vaults, kind of the undercurrent of the show. And, in that time period, people really did look towards the future and look at it in the kind of upcoming space era and have that like kind of cheesy optimism. So it feels real in that sense. It's just funny when that is presented in this post-apocalyptic wasteland with death and random violence and unknown dangers, right? And that's part of it, is that there is the black comedy element, and it always has been part of the Fallout franchise.
She can take me.
Yeah, it's a very it's always been kind of a very like Monty Python-esque look at things, right? Where it's especially on the violence front, where a lot of Monty Python sketches featured ultra violence for comedic effect, right?
Right.
And this show you can kind of have that too because you have stuff like stim packs that you just inject yourself and suddenly you're healed again because it hyper accelerates the healing of your cells. Or people that become ghouls, right, where they've got they're dosed with so much radiation basically that they can also heal and sustain grotesque wounds and things. So they can kind of play a lot of that off for laughs, which if you're okay with that, you'll be able to handle Fallout. If you're not, you probably didn't like it in Monty Python, you won't like it here either, but it is just kind of that vein of like you said, absurdist hyper violence for the sake of contrast against the overly cheerful nature of some of the other things in the show. But there were a lot of memorable, like just kind of bit characters that came through, like the potion salesman and things like that.
I've seen this condition before.
Someone stepped on my foot.
Yes, sometimes fatal. But you're in luck, because I've got the cure.
So I like that, is that the show really felt like one of these video games where there are these, NPCs, these characters you meet along the way that are very one-dimensional, but also very memorable too. So I think they kind of nailed it in a way I haven't seen video game adaptations nailed before, because they got the
it feels like
right.
a video game. That's what's so
does.
fun about it, because when you have characters like you say, like the potion salesman, even Thaddeus, who's the new squire to Maximus. You have Chris Parnell, Chris Parnell shows up, which is very hilarious as the overseer of Vault 4. Fred Armisen shows up as the radio DJ, and it's like just like I will say in the Fallout games. Even in the Bethesda games, what is notable is some of the characters you encounter and kind of the quirkiness of them and the quirkiness of those situations. And I think that's a big part of the appeal of those games and something I like about them, even though I don't like the way that Fallout, I don't enjoy playing the Fallout games as a whole these days. They really nailed that. It does feel like these are NPCs in a video game that the player characters are encountering.
Yeah, and there are more video game connections even than that with Ella Purnell, who plays Lucy on the show, also doing the voice of Jinx in the Arcane Netflix series too, which I had no idea until I was looking through the IMDb, and I'm like, wait, really? And then I listened to him, like, oh yeah, I can kind of hear it. But wow, very multi-talented actor. I mean, that show Arcane. I mean, I'm sure we're gonna watch season 2 when that comes out for the show. But the voice acting in that series was fantastic, right? So it's cool to see when people can do voice acting and in front of camera acting too, because there are differences there. It is two different skill sets. So yeah, that's neat to see.
Yeah, and basically, guys, there are going to be heavy spoilers because we're going to be talking about the entire show, and the end, does contain revelations and plot twists. So if you haven't seen the show and you would not like to be spoiled, you probably want to check out at this point in time. Basically, when we're looking at this show, there's a bunch of different. There's like 3 kind of main storylines. Well, there's 4 main storylines, let's just say, that are interwoven here. And the one storyline is Lucy McLean, who is looking for her father, going to she's the vault dweller, the eternal optimist, naive waif, fish out of water story, where she is going to the surface in order to find her father, who has been mysteriously kidnapped by raiders into her vault. We have Maximus, who is part of the Brotherhood of Steel, which is kind of a militaristic. It's a military order that tries to have power over the wasteland using kind of these metal suits that were from the wars prior to the apocalypse.
Vaguely religious in nature. Very 40K-esque.
Yeah, very 40K-esque, based off of a knight squire, relationship and a clerical order. Then we have the ghoul / Cooper Howard, and I find his story, frankly, by far the most interesting. He was a 40s and 50s cowboy movie star who is still alive 200 years later because he has become a ghoul, which means that, as Doa said earlier, he's basically being artificially kept alive through radiation and chemicals, and is kind of unkillable as long as he continues to drug himself perpetually, right? So he is dependent on these drugs in order not to become feral and wig out and start to kill everybody. And then we have the Vault 33 storyline, which is Lucy's brother and the other members of her friends and family who are still there, who are trying to discover kind of what is going on with Vault 32 and its eradication, as well as the mysteries of Vault 31, because there are 3 interconnected vaults, and they have all lived underground without going to the surface for hundreds of years. But there are some, mysterious shenanigans that are going on right there. So those are kind of the 4 main storylines and main characters that are done in this show, and I think it's the main stories are balanced really quite well and play into each other really well at the end.
It was a shockingly competent show. There's when you hear they're making a Fallout TV show, you don't go into it expecting a lot, and I feel like it's legit to have that expectation, but the storytelling and the way they, like you said, kind of weave the narratives together was really compelling and really well done. And we talked about this a lot last show with Ninja Kamui about the use of past, the use of flashbacks to inform you about the characters in the present using flashbacks. This is a show that's another great example of doing it extremely well, where they really only do it with one character, right? Because they do it with Cooper the Ghoul, because he's the one that's been alive the entire time. And so they use his backstory to sort of like explain what's happened up till now and give a lot of insight into the Vault-Tec stuff and all that. So that was one thing that struck me, was that I was like, hey, this is another great example of how you can use flashbacks to really move the story in the present forward in an effective way. And by choosing to do it with just one character, that made it much more compelling, because we didn't get very much of him in the present. If you think about it, we got more of him, almost, I believe, a little bit more of him maybe in the past, but that was his storyline, was sort of the past there. So I thought that was a really neat thing, is that one of the storylines was very much mostly flashbacks, but it really worked because it elevated everything else.
Yeah, it also helps explain, everything about the world to the viewer.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, which is great. And I mean, it's not surprising. So you guys probably know, but Jonathan Nolan, who's Christopher Nolan's brother, is one of the main producers. He directed 3 episodes of this. He's the creator of this show. You may not know his name quite as much because Christopher Nolan's more famous, but he also was a writer. He helped write Memento, The Prestige, The Dark Knight, and Interstellar.
I did not know that.
So he worked with his brother writing those. And if you guys have seen these films, how Fallout turns out with these twists should not be surprising, because both Memento and The Prestige, which he helped write, have huge plot twists in them, and are really, really great films and really well done. And the other creator of this, who is also a writer on this show, is his wife, because we have all of these husband-wife teams in the shows that we're reviewing.
Apparently that's a theme now, yeah.
It's very interesting. But Lisa Joy, also Jonathan Nolan created Westworld and wrote and directed Westworld. That's probably important to mention too. Again, the twists in these fantasy worlds. So Lisa Joy, his wife, was also a director and writer on Westworld. And Pushing Daisies, she wrote that, which is another, very famous, well-liked, well-written show. So really the creative team that they assembled behind this is kind of like shockingly good, considering that this is an adaptation of a video game, and a very well-loved video game. But usually video games have been kind of hack jobs, like the films and TV shows. And so to assemble, I mean, you really feel like they got the right crew, because I didn't know that Graham Wagner was a writer on Portlandia, but you wouldn't think that would work. But with Fallout, it actually really does work.
Yeah, now that I think about it, like the way they've put this show together is really kind of ingenious, where you've got very distinct elements that are very different, but work together well in Fallout. And so I think they took those elements for as far as writing and producing from different parts of Hollywood and different other properties, and put them together very, very accurately. Yeah. So whoever assembled this team,
really
did
good,
extremely good job.
Because you can actually see, like, the Lisa Joy, Jonathan Nolan, they bring the TV chops, as well as, what they do in a lot of these films, and with Westworld, even though Westworld fell off hard after season 1.
Yeah, I like the first season, but I kind of lost me after that. Yeah.
But if you think about Westworld, like, they have the past narrative that's going on, right? with the Man in Black, and then they have the present narrative that's happening in the fictitious Westworld, and it is kind of a conspiratorial mystery show, and as the show goes on, you're diving more and more into, you know, the creation of Westworld, who the characters are, revealing their backstories, having these plot twists. And so that element combined with like the Portlandia sketch comedy, because in a way, you know, like you said earlier, that Fred Armisen scene, it operates as its own like sketch within the show.
It really does.
And so you get these moments of levity, you know, interspersed with this very complicated and, you know, plot line and interconnectedness of the characters that's just revealed over time. And, you know, I think it's just extremely well done. Like the longer you may not be bought in, guys, when you start this series, but by episode 8, like episode 8 is really good.
It is one of the best finales I've seen in a long time, where it's just this avalanche of, you know, great scenes and plot twists, and you're like, oh my gosh, I need season 2 to come out like tomorrow, you know?
Yeah, so it does end on a big cliffhanger, which is fun, because I'm sure they're going to make a season 2 of this show. The show is definitely worth watching. Like I said, the start of it is a little slow, but I prefer slow burns that actually, like, you know, mount up that tension over time, and it really delivers by the end.
You know, I don't know. I don't feel like the first episode was super slow, because it did a really, you know, it did a really good job and a very kind of intentional focus across a couple different characters, to the extent that they were like Lucy in big words, and then it was like Maximus in big words, you know. And so they're very intentionally saying, okay, this is not like one big episode. This is kind of a series of smaller vignettes to introduce the characters, and I think you have to do that in a series like this too. So
yeah, well, what I mean about the slow burn, Doa, is like, you know, they introduce these characters and they introduce the kind of main plot points, such as, you know, Lucy needs to go find her dad, the mystery of the guy's head and the artifact that it contains. And they don't actually reveal what the artifact is until the very, very end of episode 8. So, you know, they don't blow their load early. They keep the suspense going the entire time. And it doesn't feel cheap, because it's revealed in a way where the characters don't know why everybody wants this other character's head. And so it's revealed at the end, because finally, you know, events conspire where we get to see Moldaver actually get it and then use it, you know, figure out that it is like cold fusion and infinite energy that people are after. And Moldaver is from the past as well. And, you know, she helped develop this technology back in the 1950s before everything went to shit. And Vault-Tec bought it from her and basically hid that from people as part of a, you know, cynical capitalistic, you know, maneuver. Yeah. And so I think like the way they do this and the way they build the tension really makes it compelling watching, because you know, the characters themselves are kind of awash in a game that they don't really understand, but there are personal stakes for them, whether it's Maximus's case, which is not getting killed, you know, or Lucy trying to find her father, or the ghoul trying to collect a bounty because he needs a lot of money simply to stay alive, and because he's still trying to find his family. At the end of the day, he spent 200 years searching for his family. His wife, who was a Vault-Tec executive, and we find out at the very end was up to some deeply nefarious shenanigans, which devastated, you know, Cooper Howard, and he's been living with this, but he's still out there looking for them and trying to figure out if they're alive, his wife and daughter, what he can do to find them back. And that's why he wants to get in touch with Lucy's dad, who we also find out has been cryogenically frozen from the past. So I mean, that was actually one of the greatest twists, if we want to just go there, which is like his wife's executive assistant ends up being Lucy's dad, as part of a very like hilariously corporate program to field executives of the future and do a multi-century management project, which is the most like, you know, stupid, hilarious idea.
What's really funny though is it so different from like Wade's plan in Three Body Problem? Like when I saw the big Vault 31 where everyone was frozen, I was like, Wade's got to be in there too. Like it's the same thing. I'm just gonna wake up once in a while, make sure the world's going the way I want it, and then I'm gonna go back to cryo sleep. But
well, it's also, you know, even though this is supposed to take place in the 1950s, it really is the most tech bro way of thinking about the future. Like, first off, the government has failed, ergo private companies should now be in charge of making ethical decisions, a la social media companies and, you know, the titans of the internet that we see today. Like, these people absolutely, I mean, Mark Zuckerberg, though, is currently building a doomsday bunker in Hawaii.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what these people do today. So they build their doomsday bunkers. They have survival plans. And they believe, honestly, that they should be the moral arbiters of the universe instead of the government or anybody else, because they have the wealth and they have the technology to do it. So, I mean, this really is a commentary on modern society as well that I found
well,
quite
it is
clever.
deeply satirical too. You know, not only deeply satirical of the United States of the mid 20th century, but also the United States of now too. And it's not exactly subtle. They don't beat you over the head with it to the point where you're irritated by it, but it is there. It's just, it does what satire does. Where
satire isn't supposed to be subtle.
No, it's not. But what they do right with satire is that they work the trappings of comedy around it in a way that makes it entertainment, and it is funny where you think about it, but you're also being entertained. You're not being you don't feel like you're being lectured to,
It's not like The Fall of the House of Usher, where they just literally have a really stupid, boring monologue about
a pyramid
opioids.
of pharma bodies. Yeah, basically. It's it's not literally raining corpses, but I could see that happening in season 2. I want to just go back to the beginning and kind of go through this a little bit chronologically. But and I gotta say, I was very happy to see Michael Emerson show up again. He's the guy whose head becomes the MacGuffin of the series. Which I'm sad he was only alive in one episode, because I think he's a great actor, and he plays the devious, beady-eyed, extremely intelligent,
from Lost. It was great.
Supremely creepy. Oh yeah, fantastic, right? That's what put him on the map for me, at least. But so I always like seeing him pop up. He's a great character actor. And he's only alive for one episode, but yeah, his head contains the little piece of technology that makes, we find out, cold fusion work down the line at the end of the series. So getting his head to the people that are trying to get it becomes an important thing for Lucy. Initially, he's trying to get there, but he's injured to the extent that he knows he can't make the trip, and he's like, all right, we'll just cut off my head and take my head along.
I took the pill so that it would be less taxing for you to go through with it. It'll be easier if you carry my head.
Which is kind of a hilarious MacGuffin, but it's very Fallout to have this be the quest, right? Where it's like in Fallout, it wouldn't surprise me at all to open my inventory and see a severed head in there, and that's part of the quest chain, So it made a lot of sense. It was very Fallout to have that be the main thing. Yeah, I liked it a lot. Yeah, I have to. Speaking of like the severed head sort of theme, one of my favorite scenes that just made me like laugh out loud was the very end where spoiler alert, Lucy and Maximus they are kissing. And it pans down, and they're each holding a severed head, and the heads are kind of pressed together like they're kissing too. And there's like this romantic music. It's extremely funny, and it's just sort of disturbing nature. But I love that scene.
You're my world. You're the song I sing. You're my guiding light.
Anyway,
it was a very good visual gag for sure.
It was really funny because they're both holding heads. It's established that they're both holding severed heads at the time for story reasons, and then but then they also involve a kiss because she has to go off and he has to go off, right? And so then when they pan down, you're like, no, and then of course it is what you think it's going to be, and you're like, oh my gosh.
I thought it was great.
It was awesome. Yeah,
it was a good visual gag. It was very Fallout in nature. Making the macabre into absurd humor. So yeah, that element of it, I think they nailed the tone. And by the way, guys, this is coming from two people who don't like Fallout. Well, actually, it's not true. I like Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, but I mean, like, don't like Fallout within the past 25 years.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not a big fan of the video game universe and the video game itself. Although honestly, this show made me want to go back and try it again.
Oh God! So he's going to play it for 10 minutes, and he's going to play it for 10 minutes, and then quit. So anyway, and Doa said he doesn't even like the post-apocalyptic wasteland genre. It's not my favorite, but it's not something that I'm particularly compelled by either. So if we are giving our endorsement to this show and we are kind of like from the get-go, against the premise or like not really into the world, I think if you are into this world, you should absolutely watch this. If this is something that's compelling to you, I think you will really like it.
ultimately, storytelling and characters triumph overall. You know, if your show or your movie does the characters well, does the storyline really well, that can overcome a lot of things for your audience. And this show does that
All
great.
right.
I have in my notes, looking through my notes, at one point I wrote this storyline is the best one for every different storylines throughout different episodes, because it has that sort of like a highs for each storyline where it's like, this is great, you know.
I'm actually going to push back against this because some of the characters and the acting were my least favorite parts of this show.
Like what?
The world is very compelling. So first off, Lucy McLean, her character is extremely boring and also very stereotypical. Like I said, she's kind of just this naive 50s waif who they do a fish.
Though, isn't it?
It doesn't matter what. Yes, of course, it's by intent. It's a bad intent. Like, I know that she's supposed to be the straight man in all of this because as the viewer, we're coming from a comfortable, civilized world, and she is the proxy for the viewer who is going in and trying to discover, you know, how these mutants exist in the wild, how people behave in a do or die situation. But as a result, her character is really, in my opinion, very lacking. Although I will say by the end, in her discovery about her father as being the person who bombed Shady Sands, her character arc could be interesting in the future, right? What she transforms into could be interesting.
Yeah, and they kind of lay it out immediately, like the path her character is going to go on. They kind of acknowledge what you're saying. I think where one of the very first people she talks to when she's going to the surface are like, you might not like who you become, or no, it's Michael Emerson's character. It's like,
it's Michael Emerson's character.
Yeah, you might not be able to go back, you know, because of who you're going to become, you know. So they kind of lay it out for you too. They kind of acknowledge,
but it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
I did get a little bit tired. I did have in one of my notes where I got tired of the situation where she goes into like, oh, everything's great, let's all be nice to each other, and then something horrific happens, and then slow motion like surprise Pikachu face, right?
Yeah, it's
and so good. I think they did overdo that a little bit, but I don't have as many problems with her character.
So her character, I think her character is boring. I think Maximus, the Brotherhood of Steel character, is complete garbage. And also Aaron Moten, the actor who plays him, is terrible. He has he's not very expressive. It's just like when we were talking about Monarch, like Anna Sawai, who is very good in Shogun. She was given nothing to work with in Monarch, and her character writing sucked. And I feel that about Maximus too, because he doesn't really have any motives, and like the way they express his motives is super weird in that they show me the same clips of him like as a kid like looking at the Brotherhood of Steel night and then like crawling out of the refrigerator, and they show me that like 30 times over the course of the show, and I'm like, guys, I get it. But as a result, his motivation and his history are very thin, because all they do is anytime anything happens, Stoa, they just show the same clips of him, the same 2 clips, him coming out of a refrigerator after the Shady Sands bombing, and him looking at like, oh, I want to be a knight. And it's like, that's it. That's his entire character.
I've been thinking about that though, and I feel like that was kind of the intent of his character, that his whole character storyline was that his motives were very shallow, and he's sort of discovering through his journey that there's more to life than just being
no evolution, Doa, because his evolution is I am a scared coward who wants to hide in a vault and live in creature comfort. And like,
but he doesn't. Ultimately, he rejects.
You don't know that.
Well, I mean, he does.
That's still his plan by the end.
Which I thought we were gonna. But when he goes to save Lucy by the end with the power armor, I thought we were gonna get one of those Monty Python and the Holy Grail scene where he comes in and slays the wedding party. Only in this case, it comes in and slays the hilarious trial scene. But that was another really funny scene. But that's. I'm getting away from your point, though. Yeah.
He literally, by the end, says, I'm going to go into the vault and live a comfortable life, basically, before they go on that Brotherhood of Steel mission. So absolutely, by the end, his motivation is still rescue Lucy, go to vault. That is his motivation.
That's not bad, but the thing is you see him obviously continuing to be pulled away from that too, right? Where at the end, he's kind of like, unintentionally, unwillingly made like the big hero of the Brotherhood of Steel,
Yeah, but
so it's
again, things that happen to characters, and the only thing that ever, like, Maximus is not an agent of action. Shit happens to him and then he reacts to it, except Aaron Moten, the actor, is very bad at emoting reactions. So it's like, oh, Titus is killed. He's like, makes this face.
Help me! Shoot it! Shoot it!
And yeah, it's like everything that happens to me,
a character that doesn't see. I took that a different way. I took that as his character just being so sheltered. Like his character was almost more sheltered than Lucy's character was, and I just took that as him just having no idea how to react to something like this.
It's a badly written character, and he's not sympathetic at all because he's kind of a piece of shit. If we're being honest,
that compelled me though, because he's kind of a villain, you know. When it comes down to it, he's not. He does heroic things, but he's not really a hero.
He does kind of heroic things out of cowardice, Noah.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. Is that he's not a hero. Like making heroic actions for the wrong reason doesn't make you a hero. It just makes you still a villain who decided you didn't have any other choice at that particular moment in time.
Lucy McLean is also a hero who only does heroic things out of naivety, right? And so that's why, because I think both of these characters are just deeply unlikable, and they're not actually driven by any kind of noble purpose. They're driven out of desperation and fear. And so even their romance feels really shitty and like artificial, and the actors
who cares about that? But
the actors have no chemistry, like zero chemistry together. So it's not even a believable romance. Like even when they come to the part about having sex, like yeah, they did it for a laugh and a gag, but it doesn't ever actually feel real. Like there's no attraction there.
You want to have sex?
You mean use my cock?
Yeah.
I don't know. That weird thing could happen.
So it's like super awkward because then Maximus's main motivation is like living with Lucy, and she's like, "Do you want to come live with me? Kiss." And it's like it feels fake as fuck though. Like it's really bad.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I kind of took all that as being sort of just like the part of the trappings of the awkward weirdness of the world. You know, that these people are acting in very inhuman ways. You know. So I don't know. It didn't bother me as much as it sounds like it bothered you, but I do see some of your points. So I don't think you're necessarily wrong, but I don't know. I would love to find out how much of that was intentional. That how much of it they were supposed to be.
I don't care if it's intentional or not, though. If they meant to do it, it's a bad choice.
Okay. It didn't bother me, but you're welcome to your opinions.
The characters are just bad. Like, you know, it sucks, I think, because the surrounding characters, and honestly, like the Ghoul / Cooper Howard story is really good. And I think that one is by far the best. And here's the thing, even by the end, Noah, the Vault 33 Norm storyline, I feel is actually better because Norm is a more compelling character than Lucy, his sister.
It's interesting because you do a lot with a lot less space with his storyline, and I am very curious where that all goes too, right? Because he's sort of uncovering the secrets back home while Lucy is sort of uncovering the secrets out in the wide world, you know. So you do have that interesting dynamic with brother and sister kind of both doing their own investigations. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a strong opinion on that, whether it's worse or better. I think it was interesting, but I don't really find his character super interesting. But that's like, as far as the characters go, I thought they were good enough. And you're going to hate this. You're going to absolutely hate this when I say this. But I thought they were good enough. And I'm going to say we're excluding Cooper from this because I thought he was a genuinely great character and they did a genuinely good job with the storyline. The other characters, I am interested in them in the same way that I'm sort of interested in the characters in Rogue One, where I'm more kind of just watching what happens to them and seeing the story around them unfold, and that's what's really entertaining me. And the characters don't bother me. Like, I'm not angered by the characters, but
they're
I'm not like super interested by them individually either, you know? So, and I know you hated Rogue One. We've talked about that many times.
This is why I don't like Rogue One.
And so that's interesting because it also didn't bother me this time. So I guess I'm not as hung up about that stuff as you are, clearly.
So let's be clear. When I say I don't like Rogue One, I do like Rogue One. I think it is one of the better Star Wars films, but I think it's overrated because it doesn't have characters. It just has plot.
I agree with that. When people tell me Rogue One is their favorite Star Wars movie, I'm like, are you sure?
are an idiot if that is the case, because like the original trilogy has great characters and great plot, and this actually does. Like I said, I think Cooper Howard's character is super interesting. I think Moldaver's character is very interesting.
She's barely in it.
Yeah, she's barely in it, but she's actually much more compelling than most of the other characters. And but Maximus and Lucy I find pretty boring. Hank McLean I think is pretty interesting. Especially by the reveals they give him at the end. Also because, I mean, the actor who plays him is extremely good. Like Kyle MacLachlan, you guys will probably know if you've seen, he was Paul Atreides. If you guys have seen the 1984 dude, he was like a kid. Then he was in many David Lynch projects, including Blue Velvet. He was the main character, Dale Cooper, in the Twin Peaks television show and the movie Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. So, I mean, this guy's a legendary actor and has worked with some really good directors. Like David Lynch is a legend, right?
Well, he was also one of the major reoccurring characters in Portlandia as the mayor of Portland. When
he's
he was
hilarious.
hilarious. And he was also a pretty major character for like 1-2 seasons of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. In that he was a sort of like Jekyll and Hyde character that was the father of one of the main characters. He plays a lot of fathers, it seems like. But he has incredible range and is able to play the very dramatic roles and is able to play the very comedic, silly roles. Like, I've thought for a long time he's one of the best actors in Hollywood, and I wish I could see him in more stuff because I think he's just fantastic. So we only got 2 episodes with him, sadly, in this series, but maybe spoiler alert again. Next season we'll get a little bit more of him.
Oh, we'll get a lot of him next season.
He's certainly become one of the major minor villains, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
because he's clearly not the person in charge of everything on the bad guy side, but he's one of the main players.
All I need is for him to give me the code.
Lucy! Look at me! Look at me! Lucy!
Yeah, and like so, it is getting better, I think, in terms of characterization. I mean, you can't help but one of the funny things about this show is like, I look at Maximus and he looks so much like John Boyega that like he looks like budget John Boyega, and Kyle MacLachlan now at his older age looks like Martin Sheen, like Wow.
I don't know. I can see where you're coming from. I see the resemblance you're talking about, but I didn't connect those two.
But anyway, like I was really disappointed by Maximus's performance, Aaron Moten's performance. But again, I don't think he was given much to work with there, and I think Lucy's performance is also really one note kind of until the very end. So I'm curious if they can develop these characters in an interesting fashion.
It's so interesting that you disliked Maximus's character so vehemently, and I thought it was kind of interesting because my interpretation of it was that it's this character that's like so inexperienced in the world and has this not like positive innocence, but innocence is that they just don't know what's going on, but also has this extreme sinister streak where if someone gets in his way, he'll just let them die or kill them or something. Like, and that's why I talk about him being kind of a villain. He's not likable. He's like you're kind of scared by this guy, right? Because it's kind of one of those people that like they kind of feel like they should be doing the right thing. He wants to be the noble knight, but really when it comes down to it, he's not a noble character, So I find that to be kind of interesting. So we'll see what happens with this character.
This character arc is also very similar to Finn in the Star Wars sequel trilogy that John Boyega plays, in that he is part of a military order and then he is kind of rebelling from it, from within.
I suppose. I feel like Maximus got more of a story arc than Finn did in Star Wars, sadly, because Finn was like probably the most interesting character in the first
it's true
sequel movie, but that's a whole different podcast.
But anyway, like I just find there are many ways I think you could have presented this character, and even just having an arc for this character where he is a zealot and then is like deprogrammed out of the cult, I think would have been more interesting, because he's kind of presented as he was a kid, he joins the Brotherhood, and then he just like is passive the entire time and kind of a loser. And I think it would have been more interesting to have him be more of a like a heroic, like at least, a strong zealot for the Brotherhood that then is deprogrammed over time. I think that would be a much more compelling storyline.
I think what works for me with this character is that I went to high school in a very small town, a town of about 900 people. Story time with Doa, and I knew a lot of people like him, if that makes sense. Where there just wasn't anything going on with these people, but you saw like shades of a personality. They didn't really have personalities, but they had like signs of a personality that would emerge at times. And it's just when someone is in this sort of like situation where just nothing is going on in their lives as they perceive it, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of opportunity, they can become fixated on one thing that might be unhealthy for them. And you can see like little bits of the person inside come out, but they're just not there most of the time, And so I when I see his character, I'm reminded of a lot of the people I went to high school with, where a lot of them just ended up being townies,
But Joe, I don't want to watch an 8-hour TV show about that.
I know, but I'm saying that character, like I feel like that was a realistic portrayal of a human being, one of the more realistic ones in that show.
I'm not here to watch a realistic portrayal of that person. That's not fine. Interesting writing. I understand what you're saying. I just disagree with the writing choices that were made, and I think you could have done these better. And look, I'm actually amazed that given my dislike of some of these characters and the fact that I think that they're acted poorly, doesn't actually ruin the show for me, because these are my complaints about the show. But I think that the plot is so strong and the twists are so strong, particularly by the end, that it becomes really compelling.
What was interesting? Oh, go ahead.
No, the way that they have all these storylines, they're very cleverly woven together, which is like the Jonathan Nolan staple. Like if you watch Memento or you watch The Prestige, these are both fucking all-time great movies.
I haven't seen either of those movies.
Jesus Christ, Noah. But they're all-time. If you guys know about the twists in those films, like The Prestige maybe has the best plot twist in cinema history. Willing to put that out there. And it was based on a novel, so it's not like Christopher and Jonathan Nolan came up with that. But the way that the information is presented and revealed to you is so good in both Memento and The Prestige. Also in Westworld, that it really
season 1.
It's season 1 only.
Yeah, we have to have that caveat. Like season 2 was like, and season 3, I don't even think I watched.
I didn't even watch it because I was so checked out I thought it was very badly done. Which, by the way, Doa, does make me concerned about this.
Sure, but I think the difference is that in Westworld there was such a big market difference between the environment and the setting of season 1, season 2, and season 3 that like. You don't have as much of that in Fallout, right? Where we're still going to be in the same world. It's a very much a continuation of these characters. I'm not as, and it's a different crew overall. The Portlandia guys will keep them on track. That's for sure. Like, I want to talk about the last 2 episodes. Now.
Sure.
I feel like we're to that because episode 7 was like the Portlandia episode. Episode 8 was the big drama, lots of twists, serious episode. And the one before it was like probably the most comedic episode out of the season. So I liked the transition from one to the other with that. The banishment scene from Vault 4, I think it is, in episode 7 is hilarious because Lucy thinks she's about to be executed, but instead he takes the big sword and then he starts just like vigorously trying to cut
Parnell. I mean, it's like classic Chris Parnell comedy moment, right?
Yeah.
If you guys have seen anything that Chris Parnell has been in, from Saturday Night Live to 30 Rock to him voicing Cyril in Archer. I mean, this is just who he is, right? You know this guy.
Yeah.
You are hereby sentenced to death by banishment to the surface.
So they're going to release her. Her punishment is to be banished to the surface, which is where she's trying to get to anyway, because she's trying to escape. And then they're like, we're only going to give you 2 weeks of supplies too, which is like way more resources than she's had the entire series. And so she's like, "Oh, this is great," but then
and we'll carry it up for you.
Yeah, and we'll carry it up for you too,
It's
right?
funny, right?
And then they think she's about to be complaining, like, "No, no, we'll carry it for you too." And then so everything looks like it's going okay, but then that's of course the moment where Maximus decides to charge in with his power armor and save her, and starts throwing people on, and destroying everything. So it was it was very funny. It was very Portlandia. It was very Monty Python-esque. If you remember Holy Grail and the scene where I forget which night it is now. It's been a while. Comes in and cuts up the wedding party because he's trying to save someone that doesn't end up needing saving. So it's a great scene. And then you get to the Fred Armisen radio station scene, and that whole thing where they're having this discussion about how like kids like today just don't understand music, and there's all these like grisly booby traps with bodies on them around and all that. It's so funny.
I mean, the casting of Fred Armisen there it's so Portlandia too, because he's like a music hipster from Portlandia, except it's about fiddle music and his like shitty radio station that he took over. And the idea, it says like no requests on a sign outside, and the fact that he has to defend himself. It's funny too, because he thinks that these people are coming to make complaints about the music, but they could be just trying to kill him too, or like see what supplies are in there, right? So it may have nothing to do with the actual radio station that he's broadcasting.
It's great too, because all of his stuff, he's got like giant bear traps that have like caught people. So just like his booby traps are ridiculous. There's like things that shoot arrows and stuff. Like it's absurd to the max, and it's just perfect when he shows up, and you're like, oh yeah, I knew he was going to show up at some point. Well, now they just need to bring Jeff Goldblum in for next season, I suppose. Yeah.
There were also like visual gags. So for example, when Thaddeus, the other squire who's been ghoulified, gets the crossbow bolt, like the car trunk opens and the crossbow bolt shoots him, which is very reminiscent of the end of Breaking Bad. So I think that was probably just a visual reference to Breaking Bad too, as kind of a gag, which was funny.
Yeah, I think you might be right with that. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I think one thing they need to do for season 2 is they need to have Carrie Brownstein show up now, because
she'd be great with this. Actually,
they got to get the other half of the Portlandia duo in there. You know, like I said, I see this entire show as just one long Portlandia sketch. So we'll just keep going with that. But that's also the scene too, where it ends with Maximus and Lucy kissing, and then it pans down to show that the heads they're holding also kind of kissing too, which is a great moment. But moving on to episode 8, like I'm not sure you've never read anything by Brandon Sanderson, right?
No.
So he's a very popular fantasy author right now. He's probably my favorite living author at the moment, and he's known for something called the Sanderlanche at the end of each of his books, where it's kind of this big epic conclusion that's a sort of avalanche of epic events and big twists and all that. And so it's always exciting to get to the ends of his books, because he always does it extremely well. And everything comes together great, and it's very exciting. And this episode kind of had one of those, right? Where it's like this huge avalanche of twists, of big events coming to conclusions, of things setting up future things. It was great. It was a great hour or so of dramatic television, and quite the contrast to the episode before it. But I think they got the comedy out of their system for the most part with that. And there is comedy in this episode as well, more on the darker comedy side. But at the same time, just great drama with Lucy and her father, with everything that kind of happens to the unwilling Maximus, to just the end of Moldaver's character. I really loved this episode. Definitely the best of the season for sure.
Yeah, and the reveals came at the right time. Like it's very cleverly written in that they introduce the information that you need at exactly the right time. Like, we were aware of Henry, the assistant to Cooper Howard's wife, who is a fan of Howard, right? And like, we know that Lucy's dad is named Hank, which is obviously a shortened version of Henry, but they don't reveal that till later. So it turns out that, the guy who, as he says, was like picking up his wife's dry cleaning was actually the one who became the overseer of the vault and was part of this Bud Askins like psycho management experiment. So it's really funny that you get, this fanboy of Cooper Howard from the past, and now Howard is as the ghoul, encountering him 200 years later and trying to figure out the whereabouts of his wife. So it is all like really good writing, and like the twists of how all of these characters are in fact interlinked over centuries of time is really well executed.
I've waited over 200 years to ask somebody one question. Where's my fucking family?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even going back to Bud's brain in a little robot that Norm finds in a Vault 31 is really funny, where he's trying to inject him with something, but Norm won't hold still. So this little robot is just kind of slowly coming like Roomba speed across the floor at him. It's another great
It's
moment.
honestly that that's like a almost Austin Powers-esque comedy moment.
Yeah, for sure. It's another one of those things where it's like completely absurd, but it fits in perfectly with this show and this universe and all that.
No.
What are you?
Initiate Protocol 53. All right, just hold still.
I don't know why they necessarily needed to make Lucy's mom a ghoul. I thought that was a little bit odd that was just kind of in there at the end. I was like, and then Moldaver was like, kind of holding her hand, like, "Oh, we did it, we made it." I'm like, we haven't really found out how Lucy's mom was really connected to this too much.
I mean, we don't know how
was...
Moldaver lived for 200 years either.
Yeah, so there's clearly more story to be revealed there, but I feel like that was a little bit too much of like, all right, we're supposed to care about this, but we haven't really been told why to care about it too much. We were told that they were both involved in this Shady Sands city that was apparently thriving before Vault-Tec destroyed it. So there's clearly that they were clearly both important and clearly like involved in that city, but we don't really know much more than that. And that all comes so late that I feel like that didn't hit, to the extent where it's like, well, why is that even in there? But that was the only part of the episode that really kind of, didn't quite jive with me, right? Because by the end of the episode, we've got everything I like out of a series, right? Where we've got a very well-established world. We've got multiple characters with very compelling motivations that we want to follow. We have interesting villains, interesting anti-heroes, and we've got this mysterious kind of bigger boss, bigger evil entity out there somewhere, kind of pulling the strings. So it's a great ending. Like that is how you should end a season 1, where the character completes their primary mission, but it just kind of opens the door to something bigger, I thought that was pretty perfect.
Yeah, and I liked, for those of you who are fans of the mythology, again, I haven't played many of the current Fallout games or the more recent ones, but if you go back to the beginning, like the New California Republic exists in like Fallout 2.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fun as somebody who played those games a long time ago to see now that, they're trying to, it hadn't been blown up, right? So they're continuing some of the storylines that took place within the games because this series takes place later than those games. And also, I think if you're a Fallout fan, one of the things that didn't happen in this is they didn't have any death claws, which are some of the big enemies that you have in the Fallout series as a whole. And so like we can anticipate probably, seeing death claws
we
in
saw
the future.
Skull of one.
Yeah, that's true.
Very end. Yeah, we saw Skull of one anyway, but as Hank walks off in his power armor, which I see that and I'm like, can I please have a Warhammer 40,000 show already? And like, let's put Kyle MacLachlan in it because he looks great in power armor. So let's do that. Him, Henry Cavill, like I think this could shape up to be a very cool series too. Yet I feel like every week I'm seeing yet another reason why a 40K series would be great, and that's another one. But I mean, his character is just, we talked about a little bit already, but like, I love that at the end, he kind of betrays Vault-Tec to save his daughter, and because you can tell he really does care about her, right? But he's also, very dedicated to his mission for Vault-Tec. He truly believes that he's doing the right thing, with all the stuff that Vault-Tec has done. So it's neat to see that sort of inner conflict in him because he's clearly a villain, but you don't know if maybe he can sort of be brought over to the light side at some point in the future. It's been a long day, man. I casted for like 6 hours this morning, so my voice is tired,
Yeah, and I also think the twist at the end about Vault-Tec basically starting the nuclear war so that they, because they have, this is what I was talking about earlier, where the delusion of private corporations where they think that they should be basically the ones who shape the future of humanity and that they are the ones who, will be making these decisions is such a profound arrogance. But we see that today in the billionaires who are and the kind of Silicon Valley tech culture. And and it's obviously deeply misguided, and these people are not ethically capable of making decisions for the entirety of humanity, but they believe they are. And this is obviously an extension of that and like a projection of that to the satirical nth degree. But, we know Vault Tech is the biggest company in the United States because that's what we're told in the flashbacks in this series. And Barb, who is Cooper's wife, Barb Howard, is the one who is trying to like bring about the apocalypse to try and make a new world in the image of Vault Tech, which is like really fucked up. And also, changes, I think, a lot of the tenor of the games as well. Maybe that was revealed, by the way, Doa, in some of the other games, but I think this is an interesting, addition to Fallout lore.
Yeah. Oh, I haven't played enough of the games, so you'll have to tell us in the comments if that's included in the game lore as well. But I do think it's a neat way to cement Vault Tech as the villains, right? Not necessarily everyone who lives in a vault obviously is a villain, but Vault Tech, the company who has originated the vaults, clearly a nefarious entity. So yeah, it's cool. And then, they do a lot of things to set up season 2, right? The last scene we have of Kyle MacLachlan's character is him seeing New Vegas off in the distance. So clearly that's got something to do with season 2 and where more vaults and things are. So they're kind of continuing on with some of the game storyline there, where New Vegas was a expansion for Fallout 4, I think it was, right?
It wasn't its own game,
was it?
Yeah, it was
its own game. Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, never mind. Well, it's out there. It came after Fallout 4 basically, so they're continuing along with that anyway. But yeah, I'm looking forward to season 2. I was very pleasantly surprised by how good this show was, and it wasn't perfect by any stretch, but definitely one of the better things I think I've seen on Nerd Legion.
Yeah, and I think it really just depends on whether you jive with the tone of the show or not, because look, if you're not down for the satire and you're not down for the juxtaposition of like 50s optimism and ultra violence, then like you just won't like this. I mean, that's just how it is. Like basically the tone is everything of Fallout, and you either like it or you don't. And I think, there are many people out there who probably will not like this show, but if you enjoy the plot and you enjoy, the twists and the world building, I think this is a very, very compelling show. And even though I have my issues with characterization and the way that some of these characters are written, and I feel like, 2 of the main characters are pretty just like boring and unlikable, and I don't really give a fuck what happens to either Lucy or Maximus, like the Howard Cooper or the Cooper Howard narrative is like really good. And I actually do care about that character. And I think it's really wonderfully acted as well. So.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do in season 2 as far as shoring up some of the weaker storylines, or the weaker characters rather. Cooper, definitely the most important, or yeah, I would say the most important character in the series, definitely the most interesting, but also the one that they spent probably the most time on, and also the one that has the most connection to past events and how they influence the current. So he's kind of just the most the most written character, I guess, in the series too. So we'll see what happens with that. I think there's a lot they can do with Lucy's relationship with her father. I think there's a lot they can do with Maximus trying to find where he really wants to be, because he has no idea even now. So we'll see it. I think there's a lot of good things that the show has going for it. So I'm looking forward to see where they take it.
Well, we do recommend this, guys. So we will be back next week.
Oh boy,
for the latest iteration of Snyder's horrific Rebel Moon series, which I hope to God, Doa, they don't make any more of these. I haven't even seen this one yet, but the last one was so shit. I just know that it's unsalvageable.
Well, I mean, I don't have a lot of hope for Rebel Moon, the Scar Giver, Part 2, the Scar Giver. But we said we're gonna watch it. We're gonna watch it. Rebel Moon is one of the only shows. Is it the only show I've actively recommended people don't watch? I guess if you want to know what we're talking about in the next episode, go watch Rebel Moon 1. It's very long, so good luck. But at least you'll be able to get the jokes a bit better. But yeah, it's gonna be a painful one. It's gonna be a painful one. But I embrace the pain for you at home.
That's right. We've had a good run, but you guys actually did like our Rebel Moon Part 1 episode, probably just because it was us bashing it hilariously. I assume there's going to be more of that coming, so you guys can enjoy that next week.
And we don't want to bash shows. We're not out to bash shows. It's just I have no mercy for a show that deserves it, or a movie that deserves it. So, I can be nice if you give me a reason to be nice. I'm a nice person. I'm usually the nice one. I'm the good cop to Monty's bad cop, right? But Rebel Moon turned me into the worst cop, and I'm hoping I can become good again. I'm days away from retirement, so wish me luck.
That means you're gonna die. Anyway,
I guess so. This movie may kill me. I'm not gonna lie. It's it might not. I might not last through the 3 hours or whatever it is.
All right, so go watch Fallout. It's fun. Recommended. Don't watch the new Rebel Moon. We haven't even seen it, but listen to our show instead, where we'll just mock it endlessly. It'll probably be more entertaining than actually watching it, and shorter as well. So we'll see you guys next week for another episode of Nerd Legion. See you then.